Hi, I'm Jeff DeRiso from Beckman Collaborative, and today I'm going to show you how to automatically get the latitude and longitude of your CRM records based on their address. This will allow you to visualize their location on a map using Zoho Analytics, as I showed you in our previous video. We'll achieve this automation using a custom function attached to a workflow rule. Latitude and longitude data can also be useful for finding a person's time zone, making it easier to schedule meetings with them. So let's get into Zoho CRM and I'll show you how it works. Okay, we're here in Zoho CRM and we're looking at a workflow rule. I've done a video, and several videos actually, including workflow rules. So we're just going to quickly go through this. The trigger is when a vendor is created or edited and all of the address fields are not empty. So we have and criteria. So we have to make sure every single address field is not empty. And then once that criteria is met, we run this geocode address function. So let me show you that. And of course, this is the screen where we map the arguments of our function to the actual merge fields from the module that we're automating from. So this is an important screen. You see I've mapped all of my fields to these arguments of my function. So if I click edit function, you see up here we have our arguments that we're bringing in to our function. So first we put our address fields all together into a single address string, and then we insert that string as an argument into our zoho.map.geocode integration task. And if we get a successful response from our Zoho Maps integration task, we're going to simply update those latitude and longitude fields using the CRM integration task, update records. And in a lot of cases, this is going to work. So you could theoretically stop your function right here. But because the Zoho Maps integration task is based on publicly available data, it's not always going to find that latitude and longitude based on the address that you input. So in the event that the Zoho Maps API fails to generate a response, we're actually inserting the same address into another geocoding API. In this case, we're using geoapify, and we've stored our API key in a CRM org variable. I'll show you that screen here in a minute. So we've used our crm.getOrg variable integration task and our org variable API name to store that in the API key variable, and then inserted it into our invoke URL parameter, as well as our address using the encode URL function, which basically encodes the special characters to format them properly for the URL. So then if our third-party API does produce a response, then we're doing the same thing we did up here, which is we're inserting that latitude and longitude, those latitude and longitude values into our vendor record and updating it. And then when we update our vendor record, we're using this trigger workflow object. And that's just to make sure that we trigger subsequent workflows. So for example, if we have a workflow that's triggered whenever the latitude or longitude is updated, then this update will trigger that subsequent workflow. The other thing I'll say about this geoapify specifically is that this response also gives you the time zone information, which can also be useful. And if you need to get time zone from your Zoho Maps data, you can also insert the latitude and longitude into a free time zone DB API, which I'll also leave a link to in the description. And then of course, if the third-party API fails to produce a response, we simply do an info statement of unable to geocode address. And we know if we see this info statement in our logs that it ran through both the Zoho Map API and the third-party API and came up with nothing. And I'll also show you what we can do if our automation does not produce a response, a sort of a fail-safe. But first, I'll show you the variables screen where we create our CRM org variables. So we'll close this out. We'll go to Setup, Developer Hub, Variables, and this is where we can create a CRM variable. You see I have my geoapify key here. So we can just click create new variable, give it a name, and the API name is what we use in our function. And then we'll choose a data type, whatever we want, click save, and we can now call this variable from within any function. And we can actually update CRM variables from a function as well. So even though we wouldn't do that with an API key, that is part of the functionality for CRM variables. So now let's go to the vendors module, and I'll show you what to do if our geocoding automation fails. We'll just click on a random vendor here. And if we scroll down to the address, you can see this locate map button. This is actually a product of a native integration between Zoho CRM and Google Maps. So if for whatever reason you've entered the address information, the workflow's run, and you're still not seeing latitude and longitude here, you can just click locate map, and that actually takes you in a separate tab to that address in Google Maps. And if we look at the URL in Google Maps, you can see the latitude. Right after the @ symbol is the latitude, and then a comma, and then the longitude before the next comma. So we can just simply grab these from the URL, copy and paste them into our fields here. So that's just your last resort to get your accurate latitude and longitude data for your CRM records. So now, just to test that everything's working properly, let's go ahead and add a new vendor, and we will show that the function works. So we'll give our vendor a name, test, and then we'll input the address of a known place. And we'll click save. And you see after a few seconds, we've got a latitude and a longitude value in our fields. And if we go to our timeline here, we'll see that our geocode address function ran and that it updated these two fields. So that's how you update the latitude and longitude values of your CRM records using a custom function. I like this function because we are mainly using the Zoho Maps integration task, which has basically no cost associated with it, just a single API credit out of tens of thousands. And then only if that fails do we call upon the third-party API, which will have costs associated with the usage. So we do minimize our usage of GeoApify by first running it through the Zoho Maps integration task. I will post a link to the geocoding address function that you can adapt and modify and use for your own organization if you'd like. So I hope you got something out of this video that you can use for your business. And as always, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and leave your thoughts and questions in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.